Welcome to the Unitarian Christian Alliance podcast, episode 76, Reiki, New Age Mysticism, and the Purge, with guest Heather Bonsall. I'm Mark Kane. There are some strange things in this world, and one of those is New Age mysticism. Heather practiced it, then saw the light, and in private, isolated study, launched a journey into truth and peace. Today is her story. The Unitarian Christian Alliance is a single-issue organization that does two things: helps people, like Heather, find others and connect, and it produces helpful resources on our single God and his authentically human Son. Why connections? Well, because tradition-centered Christianity is relatively intolerant of those who notice the gaps and shortcomings in Trinitarian theories. It's essential, required, the basis of the faith, they say. So naturally, if you wrestle with the actual text of Scripture and notice these problems, you become the problem. You've denied the very basis of Christianity. You are uber dangerous. So Christianity has elevated a theory to a point where it can't really be questioned. The resulting division and pain that has resulted has been accumulating over the centuries. Well, we're pushing back. You, my non-Trinitarian friend, are not alone. So be patient, loving, and understanding. There are a lot of theological toxins in the body, and they don't pass easily. We're going to be dealing with this until the church returns to the basis of our faith as Jesus taught it, that the Lord our God is one, and that God's revealed truth as to Jesus' identity is this, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Until then, we're stuck here picking up the pieces, the damaged lives, and the isolation left in the wake of Christian tradition. For us, Unitarian means what it originally meant, the belief that God is one person, the Father. That's it. Sure, there are the Unitarian Universalists who are not scripturally based at all. If you are new here and puzzled, well, that's not us. If you find Scripture to be inspiring and instructive, a basis for truth, then you're among friends. Talk of evil, specifically spiritual evil, is one of the more commonly argued topics out there. There are a few reasons for this. First, Scripture isn't that explicit. Like, there's no lesson after a demon is cast out wherein the author pauses to explain the origin, ontology, or even etymology of demon. Furthermore, the medical knowledge at the time was inadequate for discussing mental illness, chemical imbalances, and other neurological conditions. Despite this lack of specificity, it doesn't appear that Scripture gives us any pass the bucks. There's no indication that I found where we are innocent of our sins because our neighbor is truly the vilest of intolerable people and he deserves my hatred. Or I'm innocent of my sin because my night shift manager tells me it's okay to leave work early and he'll sign me out later. Or I'm not guilty of my own sin because my new coworker is exceptionally beautiful and likes to hang out with me a lot. Or I'm blameless of my sin because the devil made me do it. The buck stops with us, no one else. Influences, temptation, sin, these happen because of our hearts. Each of us is tempted when we are lured by our own desires. James 1:13. Scripture isn't specific enough for my liking on some aspects of evil, but it is specific on our culpability. And why else is this topic so arguable? Well, there's the wide disparity in experiences. Some have little or no first-hand interactions with unexplainable dark things. Others may have a long list of stories. And it's somewhat easy to consider your own experience to be the baseline of normalcy. And everyone else is likely confused, blind, or fill in your own criticism. And then there's the problem of evil itself. Where did it come from? Did God make it? Did God make beings who might have power to influence us? Why and how? That's a discussion that amps up all the speculative energy in the room. And then there's the mystery of the spiritual realm. What is it? Where is it? Is heaven one spiritual place everywhere? Or is it a vast spiritual dimension in which heaven is a subset, where God and his court lives? What are the laws of physics there? Do they have ice cream? And if not, can it really be called heaven? My list of unanswered questions is pretty long. I'd like to just settle on a set of propositions and their corresponding proof texts, which naturally I will have interpreted with 100% accuracy, and then spend copious amounts of time online letting others know how they are failing to see what is, in fact, entirely obvious. But I can't do that yet. Maybe one glorious day, but not yet. Whatever the framework, whatever the explanation, these stories of evil do exist. It would have been helpful for the Bible narrators to insert lots of explanations, but they didn't. Why? Maybe because ultimately there is a more significant truth to be gleaned from these stories. Maybe identifying the spiritual or biological origin of the phenomenon is not the most significant truth, and at least was not a concern of the authors. Today is Heather's story, and for you it may seem familiar, or it may be entirely foreign and strange. Regardless, it is a story of what is happening in our world, to people around us, maybe our neighbors. And for that reason, it's not trivial or dismissible. It's a window into a dangerous movement that entices many. Heather, it's really great to have you, and I'm excited to hear your interesting story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't we do a brief introduction to how you got to where you are now, the overview.
Okay. Well, I grew up going to church from the time I was born till all the way through high school. After high school, it went downhill. I was definitely influenced by the secular world because after graduating high school, I went off to college. I was a science major.
Okay.
So that had a little bit of influence on it as well. And I inevitably ended up as an atheist. And that lasted a pretty long time. I would say probably close to around 10 years.
Okay. When you said science, I was thinking there are faithful people in science, but then I thought, okay, science at a college that's secular.
I had that question too, like being in the field. I started thinking, like, how can these people who are in this field and teaching students about this, how can they be religious? Because a lot of my teachers were. And I started questioning that, and I didn't understand it completely, but I do now.
No, I see. Like, that's how that works. How you can work with science and still believe that there is a God above. Okay.
Right.
Interesting. Like, what kind of science? Like, what is your general field?
So I am a cytotechnologist. So my job is in the pathology department, looking at a microscope all day. I am looking at the cells on the slides, looking for cancer and precancerous cells.
All right. So you had 10 years of atheism following college, and you were, working. Then some interesting things unfolded from what I understand.
Yeah. So probably around 2018, I started getting into the New Age movement and metaphysics, all that interesting, not so good stuff.
Okay.
That goes along with like my science background anyway, because it's interesting and I'm curious about how things work. And some of the stuff that either I've experienced or thought about, science doesn't always have the answer.
Okay.
So I was curious and trying to investigate more not to prove anything, but just to why people think a certain way, or why do they believe in this or that.
In my head, I always think atheists have an absolute zero when it comes to things that are beyond the physical world that we're at now. But yet some of the New Age things seem to be very tied to a kind of spirituality that is apart from the physical reality. Does atheism persist even when you approach the New Age movement? Does it get replaced by something else?
No, I would say it would not persist. And I think that was the way that God got me back into believing of a higher power. So, yeah, with the New Age stuff, I really don't think you can keep atheism.
What started to unfold then as you began to explore that?
So at that time, I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was looking for local groups or classes to kind of get a better idea of what's all involved or like how it works. And so I joined a Reiki class.
Reiki?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reiki, if you don't know what it is.
Yeah, you should explain it. I won't be the only one. I've heard the word.
Mm-hmm. It's a form of energy healing. They call it an alternative medicine practice. Their belief is there is an energy source, like a universal energy source. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it God. You can call it the universe. You could just call it source. So what the Reiki practitioner will do is they channel this universal energy through their body, out through their hands, onto the client.
Okay.
And this is supposed to help balance their energy field. It's supposed to calm you down and center you and heal you somehow.
Okay.
Yeah. And my curiosity took me all the way through, and I ended up becoming a Reiki master.
Okay. Okay. So my question then, did it really do things? I mean, I hear all sorts of things like put a crystal in your pocket or hang this,
right.
And I'm like, I also know they have these things called sugar tablets, and they say if you take this, it's a vitamin and you'll feel better. And in fact, you do. So
yeah.
During this time, I mean, to get all the way to the point of master, you had to have done this a lot, and you had to have seen things that would have been like, okay, yeah, something happened, or no, it didn't, above and beyond the placebo effect, which as a science major...
Right. The first class I took, being just in the curiosity mode and still having a heavy skepticism.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I'm just like, is this it? I'm like, I didn't feel anything. I didn't notice anything. I'm going to have to say it does work, but it's not what they think it is.
Okay.
And that has to go more towards, it is spiritual, and it's more on the bad side.
Okay. People experience things that were not to be expected by the normal physical reality.
Right.
At the time, you didn't see it as bad.
Yes.
I mean, you had kind of a Christian upbringing. Was there misgivings about that?
Okay, so no, because with the Christian upbringing, I didn't really ask a lot of questions because when I did, I didn't really get a good answer. And you were kind of more pushed off and just like, you just have to believe or just have faith. I'm like, that doesn't answer my question. So, no, I never read the Bible until maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I didn't know that information either.
So. Can I ask what denomination it was that you grew up in?
So I grew up Methodist, and then I was confirmed UCC.
United Church of Christ, okay. This is very new to me. I don't have time in my life to try to understand what people do with crystals and energy and chakras.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask these kinds of questions all the way through. You'll just have to put
it. That's fine. I investigated it very well.
You did due diligence. Yeah. Making it to a master in that was well beyond reading 2 articles on a wiki page or something.
Right. I was going to say, and depending on your teacher, Reiki is introduced with a Christianity background.
Oh?
Yes.
How would that even work? Explain that.
Okay, so it's from Japan. And the Japanese man who started it, he was Christian. I forget his name. I think he was out hiking or he was on a journey or some sort, and he got hurt and he couldn't move, so he couldn't continue, and he was by himself. And he was told by something that he could not see what to do to help heal himself so that he could continue on.
Hmm. And so he just incorporated that into his Christianity, I guess. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So how long did it take you to achieve the level of Reiki master?
So each level is just one class, pretty much. And depending on your teacher, how long they make you wait in between. I did all of it within a year.
Okay. Your motivation then, where were you hoping to get? Kind of an endpoint for this?
Right. So with it being considered an alternative medicine, I thought being in the medical field, I like helping people, and maybe this could just be like a side thing I could do eventually.
Okay.
But I didn't. I practiced on my roommate at the time, and I went to a couple Reiki shares where other people who are doing Reiki get together and you'll do Reiki on each other. But I mainly just, you can use it for objects. You can infuse the Reiki healing energy into objects. And then whoever holds that object or just has it in their possession can absorb that energy.
Okay. Does that really work? I mean, that's... Okay. To be fair, pieces of cloth were transferred from, I think it was Paul. I think he was in Ephesus. They would take pieces of cloth out and people were being healed from it.
Right.
So that's not actually a particularly strange idea.
Right. But it's the opposite. So with Paul, his was the power of God.
Yeah.
The Reiki is the enemy.
Okay. All right. So in this time when you were practicing it, had you ever seen what you would consider a remarkable transformation or healing of something?
Me personally, no. Like the only thing I've seen people experience or experience myself was just after a session, you would just feel really relaxed.
Okay. Which would be the same as like a Swedish massage where they tear up all your muscles.
Yeah.
All right. So 1 year, you're a Reiki master. And then what unfolds next?
So myself and 4 other women doing Reiki got together and formed a podcast.
What? Okay, I knew this was coming. Yeah, you and I talked about podcasts for a while and I got super excited. Was it about Reiki or was it broad?
It was broad. So we considered it a metaphysical podcast.
Okay.
There's a lot of Reiki podcasts out there. And if we just stuck with that, I think we would have ran out of information to talk about.
Okay.
And within the New Age and the metaphysical community, there are so many different things out there. Like we just wanted to bring everything in so that we could educate everyone on every possibility that they could get their hands on.
I see. This then sounds like it was born of a desire to be helpful.
Yes.
You didn't have like some malicious,
Yeah. A lot of the people in this community, either because they don't have a Christian background or even like me, they could have a Christian background but never really tried to learn more about it. They don't actually know what they're doing and what they are putting out there, leading people in the wrong direction.
Okay. Good intentions, bad delivery or something.
Right. Or the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes, there you go. I think that is in the Bible. I've been hoping to read that exact line.
Yeah.
No. But wide is the path. All right, so you start a podcast. What part, were you one of the guests talking on it?
So it started out, the first season was all 5 of us were hosts.
Woo.
Yeah, so it was a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but a lot of who's supposed to talk, when are we supposed to be quiet?
Yeah.
Because we kind of split up the questions for the guests that we would talk to.
Yeah.
But it was just, no one knew when to jump in.
Chaos.
Yeah. After the first season, we shrank it to 2 hosts. And even in the first season, I did all the editing. And then so the second season, I just produced and edited.
Okay, I get it. As soon as you said all those hosts, I was like, wow, that was going to be a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so you ended up being the editor. So you do what I'd spend my weekends doing. You were looking at audio and adjusting and cleaning up. How fun.
So much fun.
So you start this podcast, you're helping them produce it, and you're exploring lots of areas. You were doing research, you were talking about things, and you had all these other guests working through these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Did it build upon your New Age understanding and move you forward?
Yeah, I was looking into the different areas. I wasn't really investing in any of it. I was just more curious and just learning, and because it's very interesting stuff. But then during the second season, I got a different job. So I went from Pittsburgh to Nashville, Tennessee. So in Nashville, I was isolated. With my job, looking in a microscope all day, I can listen to podcasts for 8-9 hours a day.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. So some of the podcasts I listen to are on the supernatural side.
Okay.
Because it's interesting. And also it helped me understand the supernatural experiences that I've had throughout my life. And at least 2 of those podcasts are hosted by Christian individuals. Like, they are openly Christian, and they will tell you about this on their podcast. Like, they don't hide it. And so I started looking into Christianity again.
Okay.
When I did that, supernatural stuff kind of amped up a little bit because the enemy doesn't want you looking into that.
Okay. Like, what kind of an experience would you have? You've said the word supernatural a few times. I think it would help to understand what you mean by that.
So what I would mean by that is part of it is things happening that you can't see with your eyes. So it's the invisible part.
Okay.
Some of it is, so I suffer from chronic sleep paralysis, which has taken me a long time to figure out. And science doesn't really help you because they just say it's some chemical in your brain that allows your mind to wake up before your body. And I can't say that's wrong. Like, I'm sure there is a physical part to it, but there's also a spiritual part to it. And in my opinion, it is predominantly a spiritual attack. So around this time, that started happening more and more often as well. And then it was, I want to say it had to be a weekday, but I was after work and I was just convicted so hard. It was more of just like a realization of what was going on. Like, it all hit at once. And I just had a complete emotional breakdown. Finally realizing what was going on and why it was happening and what was happening. That night and then the rest of that week, I was just sobbing, going through my apartment, collecting all of my New Age stuff that I've accumulated over the years, and anything that was that I could burn, I threw it in the fire. If I couldn't, it went in the trash. I ended up quitting the podcast.
Yeah.
And since I was the editor, they finished out the season. So it was probably at least halfway through the season, maybe. I sent all of the equipment I had for it to one of the other ladies to take over. And it ended after the second season because it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it. So,
yeah. I'm interested in that moment where it hit you.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like the way it hit you, you understood with enough clarity to go back to your house and look for those things. Like, it wasn't just, oh, God is good and he's really there and he loves me. But that doesn't sound like what you just described.
No. No, it was more of like him telling me, you've gone too far. That's enough. You have to stop. And I did. So it was very eye-opening. even after that week, I was like all day long, even at work, for like weeks afterwards, I was just on the verge of tears.
Mm. Tears of, like, what kind of tears?
More on the lines of, I messed up.
Oh. Tears of sadness and regret.
Yeah.
So from when you began exploring Reiki to this point, how many years were you looking back at with your tears?
Probably about 4 or 5 years. But not even that, like the whole 10 years of atheism, like denying him.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't mad at him. I completely believed that he did not exist.
Okay.
Okay, so during the atheism, I was mad at myself for actually believing in God at one point. Like, I can't believe I was that stupid and so gullible, and I was brainwashed and all this stuff. And then this happened. I'm just like, I feel stupid because I actually denied him.
Mm. You were in a very short period of time undoing, I guess, spiritually, you were undoing years of things that you no longer believed.
Yeah, because with the copious amount of time I have Monday through Friday to listen to podcasts, after that happened, it was all theology podcasts and anything I could get my ears on that had to deal with Christianity, God, Christ, all of it. I couldn't stop.
When that moment happened, I mean, it seems like you might have seen this approaching if you were reconsidering, and each time you were reconsidering, it got stronger. Or it could have been more of a sudden hit. Does that make sense?
It was kind of gradual in that, like, the New Age and the metaphysical stuff wasn't giving me the full answer I was looking for. And then once I started researching Christianity, it hit like a ton of bricks. Yeah. So it was kind of gradual, but it was just a big slap in the face all at once.
Were you at work when that, you said it was on your way home?
Yeah, it was after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a difficult day at work to...
Yes, it would have.
When that moment came and you looked at your own things in your house, there was clarity in what you were seeing and what you're thinking at that time. How would you describe what those things represented? It's one thing to be like, well, I don't believe that anymore, but no, for you, it had to go. Yeah,
that makes sense, because I've had to explain that to friends, because I even started contacting people right away. I'm like, that thing I gave you, get rid of it now.
Okay.
Or burn this or whatever. They're just like, why? So to me, after this happened, it was kind of two things. Like, it was kind of symbolic. Like, it represented the enemy and the wrong path. But also, because it's not of God, when you do these things, you are opening yourself up and you are actually allowing things to come in and you don't even know it. Like, you're allowing the influence of the enemy. You're allowing demonic activity. You're allowing attachments to come in because you're open to it. And so these things actually had that. So I had to get rid of it to get rid of that influence.
Okay.
I know what's attached to that thing, and I don't want it in my house.
Were some of these things literally like the things that you had talked about before, where you had done activities on the objects themselves?
Some of them, some were like the tools. Like, I had tarot cards, the crystals, dream catchers, astrology charts. I had a Buddha statue. Even books I had, like everything. Like if I could burn it, I threw it in the fire. And the tarot cards that I used the most, when I put them in, there was a 6-inch flame coming out of each end with each card I threw in there. The other ones didn't burn that way.
Okay. For people like me who have never really paid much attention to that and have not got involved in that,
Mm-hmm.
I think this happens a lot in the Western civilizations where we just do our work, we go to school, get our job, and we're not thinking about the spiritual side of what's really happening, what might be going on inside of a person or what something represents.
Right.
I have probably more questions than we could fit in this podcast, but when you were tapping into this activity, the Reiki and the other aspects of this, it was convincing for you that something was really happening. There wasn't, you didn't go home at night and be like, I'm just fooling myself. This is silly. Like you literally were sure that you were activating energies in these other things. Is that right?
Yeah.
And how were you sure? How did that...
Things happen. Well, I was going to say, like, I was going to use, like, the manifestation that they like to talk about to bring stuff into your life.
And you're hesitating?
It works. It works, but it's not coming from where you think it is.
Okay, well, then just go ahead and describe that then.
Yeah. You put your mind to something, you do rituals to try and bring a certain something into your life, and it happens. And you can't explain it. All you can say is, I put the thought and the energy and the intention into it, and it came into my life, and they just think that it's just all them. Like, the power that they did brought that and made that happen.
And what are examples of that? Like, what kind of things were...
People, they try to manifest a bunch of stuff. They'll try and manifest a significant other. They'll manifest money. They'll manifest, I don't know, something they need for their car. They manifest everything.
Well, that sounds a lot like the prosperity gospel people. Like, if you just go for it, God will make sure you get it.
Right.
Which, honestly, it doesn't feel that different to me because
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah. That is similar because with the whole manifestation in New Age, it's if you put enough intention and energy into it, it's going to come because you want it. The universe is trying to work with you. So it's going to help you get what you want.
Wow. I guess the manifestations was one way that you saw the output of the New Age work. Were there any other things that were, people will be like, things might happen that you don't like?
Yeah.
Were there any don't likes?
Yeah, I was in my kitchen. I just made some eggs. I was holding a hot pan. And I got whacked in the middle of my back so hard, like I froze. And all I could think is, don't drop the pan, because I don't want a hot pan falling on a foot. And I live alone. Like, it wasn't a back spasm. Like, it was, someone said, like, really, really hit the middle of my back. So that goes along with the things happen that you can't see, the invisible part of this reality.
Yeah. Why would... what advantages of those negative things? I don't know. That's...
Right. Okay, so I can incorporate this into the good and the bad part of the New Age and the metaphysical stuff.
Okay.
So when good things start happening to you, all the stuff like you're trying to work for, or even trying to help people, the enemy first likes to build your trust. So they're going to try to work with you to get you to trust and then start depending on them. And then eventually some things will start working for you, some things won't. And it's up to you to figure out like why it didn't work, if you did the ritual wrong or if you didn't put enough intention into it or whatever. But once I started moving away from that and getting into the truth, they start making things go wrong. They start with me. There was a physical attack. They tried to instill fear to either get you to deviate from the path that you're going on or to try to get you to go back to where you were. Be like, oh, well, this new thing isn't working. Bad things are happening. Maybe I should go back to this way because it was working out better for me.
Oh, I see. It was all fine when you weren't reading the Bible.
Right.
You probably should stop. Yeah. Okay, so it turns negative as you were backing out of it.
Mm-hmm. So we'll say my spirit guides, as the New Age people would say, they turned on me.
Okay. And what would be the word you use for spirit guides in biblical parlance?
Demons.
Okay. But it does sound a lot nicer to call them spirit guides, I suppose.
Doesn't it? It makes them sound a lot nicer and friendly, and they want to help you.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Well, that's fascinating. The understanding of the spiritual world is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone different places in my life. As a child, I thought there was no Satan. I couldn't conceive of there being evil spirits and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a later point in my life, I thought, oh, no, maybe that's what it is. And then I would study a little bit more and realize, well, okay, some of the arguments that are made, it's easy to just read a passage about like a king and say like, well, that had to have been Satan, like King of Tyre, for example. Like, well, it didn't have to be,
Mm-hmm.
And it ultimately led me to a point where I am now, where I don't know exactly how that all works, and I don't claim to know how that all works. I do know that many of the people in the New Testament thought that that's what was happening, that thought that there were some sort of a spiritual activity going on. Certainly there could have been people who had a mental illness and they were cured,
Right.
and it would have been completely the same as if they had had an actual demon possession and that demon was cast out. To an onlooker, that could have looked identical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a topic for me that I don't understand. But your experience, I mean, you're describing what happened and how it was perceived.
Mm-hmm.
And in the New Age world then, entities like this are named. I mean, they call them spirit guides. Like,
Right.
what do they think the spirit guides are?
They think there's angels, dead relatives, animals,
Okay.
divine beings. Like it's an angel or it's a god. There's multiple gods. There's ascended masters. There's...
How would they even know, though? I mean, are they talking, having conversations like, can you please clarify, are you angelic or ascended I mean, how do they?
Yeah, you can, well, one of the things you're not supposed to do as a Christian is divination, and you can get answers using pendulums and tarot cards and mediums, Ouija boards. Yeah, you can talk to them and they will answer you. A lot of the time they're going to tell you what you want to hear, what you're interested in, especially if it has to do with maybe someone that's passed and you're grieving and you want to know that they're fine, they're okay, they're not in hell, they're being taken care of. Beware of familial spirits.
So in the New Age movement, are there any that are bad? I mean, it seems like if it's all bad and pretending to be good, that there would be at least an awareness within the New Age movement that some of this could be bad.
Yes.
But is it like just turning a blind eye to that because, hey, we're getting what we want and it's okay? Or
No. So within the New Age, if you're getting what you want, like those are your spirit guides who are on your side, they're on your team, they're helping you to live your best life and to get everything your heart desires. When things go wrong, or even with like bad emotions that you experience, they do acknowledge there is a good and a bad, there's good and evil. But our job is to balance that out. Evil has to exist to balance out the good and vice versa. I never heard anyone actually call like the evil spirits demons. But they do acknowledge that there are entities that are evil, whatever, or it could be just people who have passed that were just evil when they were alive and they're just trying to mess with people.
But it's not bad enough that they'd be like, maybe you shouldn't dabble in this.
Right.
Keep the evil in a little box over there and you can reference it maybe, but we'll be okay.
Right. We have good spirits on our side that are going to help us. It's going to be all right.
I see. And you've got all the crystals. So, I mean, how could it go wrong?
Exactly. Just surround yourself with a bunch of quartz. It'll clear out everything. Bring out your sage because they're really afraid of smoke.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. How much? Okay. All right. Well, this is so fascinating. That's again so different from my own experience.
I want to say, because you said you don't have much experience with the manifestation of the spiritual or whatever. You stayed in the faith your whole life, pretty much. You didn't open the doors to allow demonic influence to walk in, or it's what you allow. So if you were strong and hung on to Christ, you're a lot better off. You don't have that much influence with the negative part.
Well, I'll consider that a blessing then.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
Well, then that would make sense why the people who, like missionaries in countries where the religion there is all based around...
Like paganism?
Yeah, that kind of thing where there are some stories that are just completely different. Like, it's almost to the point where I can't even believe that would happen. Mm-hmm. They go into pagan places where the rituals and the practices are based purely upon talking to who they perceive as their gods and the spiritual beings that surround them. Things are weird in those places that are so different than this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. But that's why, I guess, in terms of like opening the doors to not good supernatural things.
Yes.
When you make yourself a faith based upon that, I mean, how else could you open the doors any wider? It's like that is your daily life.
Right.
Lot to think about. Mm-hmm. Okay, Heather. So you clean house. Mm-hmm. What have I done with almost 15 years of my life? And I guess you could even look back at the time when you had an opportunity to have faith and didn't really act on it.
Right.
Lots of regret. How do you move through that, and what happens as you come out?
Well, as I said before, it was lots of theology podcasts while I'm working. I would say that I was finally actually born again. Like my whole outlook changed. When that happens, like your life actually changes and you yourself are a completely different person. Like I am nowhere near the same I was even 6 months ago. And it keeps changing, keeps getting better. Personally, not as in everything is grand, everything is going well. Like I have never felt freer in my life. I've never felt more at peace. I've had bad social anxiety my whole life. That completely ended. And I just keep asking for it to continue and to keep having him change me for the better. I started, even with Christianity, there's so many denominations and so many beliefs. And I'm just like, started looking into all that because like out of curiosity, like, why does this person believe this? Or why does this denomination have these certain belief systems? Like, I wanted to understand why. Mm-hmm. And at one point, there was a podcast I was listening to, and I think the host was an actual preacher. And the one episode that I listened to, he was talking about how we're supposed to worship God in spirit and truth. And he was focusing on the truth, and he was saying like the whole truth. And he was picking out like Christian songs saying like, just this lyric makes this song something you shouldn't listen to because that lyric is not part of the whole truth. So then I start thinking, well, I want to know the whole truth.
Yeah. So
I start praying and asking him like, I want to worship you fully and truly. And like, I don't want a partial truth. I don't want a twisted truth. Like that's this whole world. There's partial truths and twisted truths. Like I want the whole thing. it was a day or two later. He put the Restitutio podcast on my phone. And started listening to that. I'm just like...
You just said, he put that on your phone. Hold on.
Yeah.
I have...
So, since the majority of my day is listening to podcasts or music, a lot of my guidance comes that way.
Okay.
So when I asked, how can... Like, I want to know the whole truth. Like, is there a truth that I believe in that might not be fully complete, or is it twisted, or...
Yeah.
So a day or two later, I said he put it on my phone, like it was a recommendation.
Oh, okay.
On the list of recommended podcasts. And so I clicked on it, was looking through it, looking at the different episodes that Sean has. And with the whole biblical Unitarian stuff, I'm just like, I didn't even know that was an option.
Mm.
And so started binge listening to that, and then I don't have time to do all the research. So I really appreciate Sean's research. And if there was something that I questioned, at least he told you where he got it from, and you can look into it yourself on your own time, which was nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And it made so much more sense. And it strengthened my faith. It strengthened my relationship with God and Jesus. That's how I found out about the UCA, that website. So I signed up there.
So would you have even considered, I mean, I guess at the time, if you were just listening to Christian podcasts, it sounds like you weren't in a group being taught in classes or anything like that. Like you were still pretty isolated.
Yes.
Just picking things and absorbing things as you worked and that kind of thing.
Right.
Would you have even considered yourself a Trinitarian at that point in time, or were you just somebody searching?
No, I was definitely a Trinitarian at that time. I didn't know anything else. Like when I first listened to your podcast, I'm just like it just boggled my mind. I'm like, you thought that your whole life?
So at the point when you caught Sean's podcast, it was an option then that you could consider.
Right. Yeah, after listening to all the different denominations of Trinitarianism, and then there's the Unitarianism, I was just listening to understand it, like why.
Yeah.
And it made a lot more sense. It made the Bible make a lot more sense. I'm just like, if you don't look into it and you're just taking what you're told, like you're not, God doesn't even want you to do that. He wants you to question. He wants you to look into it. Like, he doesn't want minions. He wants a relationship.
Yeah. So you never really connected with any group of people. I mean, you went through a stage of faith that was Trinitarian, and then, so you were already isolated before you became a non-Trinitarian.
Right.
That seems like it would be awful, for lack of a better word, not having people around you that you connect with.
Like, it could be to some people. I didn't mind because I'm highly introverted, so I like being alone. And I can sort through my thoughts, do my own research, and read the Bible by myself, and use either a podcast or a YouTube video as a reference as I'm reading, and like see if I agree with it or not. And it wasn't just like this sounds great, this makes sense, I'm gonna cling on to this one. Like I don't work that way. Like I'll listen to you to figure out why you think that way, and then I think about it for a while and compare it to other things. And so I would say even after I was hit hard, I was still a Trinitarian probably until February of this year. So it was almost a whole year. Within that whole year, like I was just absorbing everything. I was listening to everything theological, and it was a lot of information. So like when I got to that point, it made sense faster than it would have if I would have started out that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like every pump had been primed and tested before you got to the point when the one came out with water that tasted all right.
It all comes together. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the purge, we'll call it, that moment in your life where you dumped all that away, has there still been a struggle with that, or how protected have you been from all of that past influence?
I've been pretty protected from that just because I've been isolated, and I think that was on purpose. That was a God-led isolation. Like, I needed that. If I was not isolated here in Nashville, I would have still been in the place I was a few years ago. He needed to isolate me, and then he needed to slap me in the face. And I'm very glad that he did.
Well, it's fascinating because being together is one of the directions, one of the instructions that are in the New Testament. Like, don't neglect being together.
Right.
But I know that people are in certain circumstances, and, even Jesus went out to the wilderness. Paul spent time away after his conversion. I would say, in general, we should seek to be encouraged by each other and find connections and that sort of thing, which I guess technically by signing up to the UCA, you kind of put your hat out there like, I'm actually okay with making some new connections now.
Yeah, and I did start going to a local church. It's a Trinitarian church, and that was nice. Like, it was nice to be around people. But most of my learning happens alone. And I think if I would have had other Trinitarian believers in my life as I was going through this, I think I would have got some discouragement. I think I would have not questioned certain things because of an outside influence of someone who is set in their faith and will not question anything.
Where some people have close friends who will react very negatively to you asking questions, or a family member or a spouse.
Right.
You had the freedom, is what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
The freedom to just, let me just explore this and listen and think. Okay.
Yes. And that's a good thing too, because if I have someone that would react negatively or try to influence or dissuade me from looking into things, I don't always have a good response. I wouldn't be mean, but I'd just be like, okay, just leave me alone. We're not going to talk for a while.
I see.
I may be isolated right now, but it's not going to be like this forever.
Okay.
It's a season.
Yeah. I'm excited for the possibilities of you making really good friends and having good connections where you don't have to have those kinds of difficult, wait, what did you think? Okay, that's it. We're not friends now, or you can't get behind me, Satan. They could do that.
Right.
It doesn't build a friendship very well. No. So what are your plans then? I mean, are you just rolling with it as you go? I mean,
he is definitely guiding this whole process, and I'm just going where he leads me. It's just a matter of time. Like, it's not the right time yet. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay. You had mentioned the person from Japan. Reiki was added into his faith to some degree. And then we talked about the prosperity gospel, which curiously sounds an awful lot like New Age manifestations.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you think Christians are going into the directions like this, where they're asking for things, they're seeking things that aren't from the right place? Would they even know? Does that make sense?
It does. I would say more and more are going in that direction, and that's more based on society. And I would say a majority of them don't know. I don't know for sure, but my opinion would be is because they don't look into it. They just like what they hear. It sounds good, so it must be good. So why not give it a try? Instead of comparing it to what Scripture says.
Do you have like a specific example of somebody you know, or something that is that kind of thing?
Yoga.
Okay.
Because the yoga teachers, depending on their education on yoga, they'll just tell you it's exercise, it's stretching, it's relaxation. But those poses are part of ritual. And Hindu worship. They just didn't make it up because it stretches you really well in that certain area. Those poses mean certain things.
But if you don't know they mean certain things, do they still mean certain things? Does that make sense?
Right. Like if you don't know and you're just doing it because it's exercise, like are you opening yourself up to whatever? I'm going to say to a certain extent you are. With you doing that activity, you're saying, I accept this. Even if you're just thinking it's just exercise, I'm stretching, I'm strengthening my muscles. You can stretch and strengthen your muscles other ways. You don't need yoga.
What if I do CrossFit? Is CrossFit also Hinduism?
I have not investigated CrossFit, but from what I know, it's just exercise. It's not based on any Eastern religion.
No, it's based on making you feel like your body was hit by a train.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good example. Somebody offered a free yoga class through work once. It was strange because it didn't feel like it was just, let's help you stretch. There's an undertone that I couldn't describe very well to it. And maybe that's what you're expressing, that the whole pattern itself and all of these things, there's more to it. It comes from something else.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned Ouija boards earlier.
Yeah.
People think it's just a game, and some crazy things happen to some people, even if they think it's just a game. So, and it's not like they're actually searching or thinking, yeah, I'm going to bring in this entity into my house. They're just playing with it.
How did that ever become a Milton Bradley toy? What in the world? Let me just check. Was it Milton Bradley? I think so.
I don't know.
I didn't know how to spell it.
I think it's
Hasbro.
Hasbro.
Oh, and it's good. It's currently unavailable on Amazon. Yay! Like, how did Hasbro ever think this would be a great game to put on the shelves in toy stores? It's weird.
The enemy tries to get at you however they can.
At one point in my childhood, I remember seeing somebody had one of these. To your point of having grown up with a faith already in place, I just knew I didn't want to have anything to do with it. It just felt wrong. How was a kid who grew up, in a broken home with no faith, lacking in hope and dreams, how would they have some sense that this is just a terrible idea? To them, it could look like a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Which I guess is part of the draw of the New Age movement. If you've got nothing to start with, and it's promising you manifestations of things in your life,
right,
it's going to be appealing.
And I even know some people who, in the New Age, who they consider themselves Christians. Two of the women I did that podcast with, they would even say they were Christian. Now, knowing what I do know, I'm just like, you're not, and you don't even know it. You think you are, but you never really looked into it. You don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you've done. It's hard because I've tried talking to them about it. They're just set. They're just like, no. They don't want to hear it. They even said, they're like, I'm so glad you found peace with this. And it was pretty much a nice way of saying, stop talking to me about this, please.
So you've lost connection with those people then at this point. You don't have ties. Okay.
Right.
There's a lot to be processed by the information that you shared today, and I appreciate that you did that and that you were willing to do that as an introvert. Maybe this is part of your, like, okay, next step, I've spent enough time in isolation. I will at least talk out loud.
Yeah. That has been a problem. Like, I want to talk about stuff and no one here. And people that I do talk to don't want to talk to me about it.
So, the kinds of struggles that you go through to get to where you are, so different from me. So different. And you did it. You pulled through. You came out the other side. God was faithful with you. He held you through the whole thing. And here you are at peace, looking to your future and waiting to see what happens. That's very encouraging, even though it's like a big mystery. Like, what is actually going to happen for you? I don't, it sounds like you don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Your podcast is nice because you hear everyone's story, but it's more about seeing all the different ways that God is working in every single person's life. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this interview within the past couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking like, what should I say? What shouldn't I say? How much information should I give out? And then it was, I think this morning, I just got the impression it's like, it's not about you. It's about me. Like, you are telling these people what I'm doing in your life. And I'm like, that takes a lot of weight off my shoulders. Thank you.
Yes. I'll have some final thoughts on this interview in a moment. We're 1 month to the next UCA conference, and for your curiosity, here are the paper topics and then the workshop topics. Will Barlow will talk about prayer to Jesus, a call to fellowship. Sean Finnegan, the deity of Christ from a Greco-Roman perspective. Jerry Weirwill, Jesus, God and Savior, problematizing the Granville Sharp rule in Titus 2:13 and 2 Peter 1:1. Jerry packs a lot into his titles. Nathan Massey's presentation, Ignatius of Antioch, Authenticity and Sub-Apostolic Christology. Dustin Smith, The Incarnation of Wisdom in Pre-Christian Judaism. Sam Tiedemann, Unveiling the Double Narrative Using Typology to Understand Christology in John's Prologue. And then Dale Tuggy, 10 Arguments for Unitarian Inclusivism. Those sessions will be happening several times through the day. And at the same time, should those topics maybe not have been to your liking, there will be these workshops going on as well. The topics include homeschooling, deconstruction without destruction, hermeneutics, translating difficult passages, and dealing with shame. For families coming with younger children, we don't have official childcare services, but we do have some generous people there who will be helping. For example, last year I did a workshop for the kids and a few adults on how to do ventriloquism. That was such a blast that we're going to do it again. I also have some helpers who might be able to do some crafts with the younger kids during a workshop slot or two. So we are actively working on it. But as I said, we don't have provided child care services. If you come with your kids, you do need to be responsible for them. If you haven't heard the previous episode yet, and you are a young adult, know that we have some specific times set for you guys to connect. I'm hoping you make some amazing new friends. That's episode 75, Ready to Go, Young Adults Roundtable. A reminder that we now have ways for you to contribute based upon your particular passions and what you want to see happen. There's the Publishing Fund, and Keegan Chandler talked about that in the last episode. There's the Marketing and Advertising Fund, and there's the International Conference Fund. Go to UnitarianChristianAlliance.org and click Donate in the top menu. As I was editing and reflecting on my conversation with Heather, I remembered one of the accounts in Acts that I had studied a few months ago. Acts 19, verse 18. Many of those who were now believers came confessing and divulging their practices, and a number of those who had practiced magic arts brought their books together and burned them in the sight of all. And they counted the value of them and found it came to 50,000 pieces of silver. I remember at the time thinking that they did this, the burning of their stuff, as a public display of their new faith, like a breaking of the ties to their old life. But now I see it differently. This is Heather's story, but 2,000 years ago. I suspect that these sorcerers and whatever they were tossed their books in there for more than just a public display. I have a new appreciation for what those books may have represented to them and why they may have felt compelled to destroy them. One advantage, if you could call it that, of having had different understandings of demons through my life is that I will readily filter new information through a few different perspectives and see how it works. It certainly is comforting to have a solid explanation for everything. But there is something comforting in having at least a smidgen of uncertainty. If it turns out that I'm wrong and that someone else is right, or if it turns out that you are wrong and someone else is right, if you at least know what that someone else has been saying, if you are at least familiar with the alternative perspective, then you are less likely to be surprised if something big happens which doesn't fit your model. For example, there are many various models for end-time events. I have what I think is the most likely, but if I'm wrong and the world goes a direction quite different than my assumptions, I don't want to be caught up in a lie. I don't want to be fooled. So it's the same here. If demons are not what I think they are, and I'm therefore oblivious to something happening around me, I don't think that's to my advantage. My hard-nosed certainty could put me at odds with reality. And when it comes to evil, I don't want to chance it. At the same time, it's also possible to become engrossed in a subject to our detriment. If the New Testament writers didn't belabor the point about the ontology of evil, maybe it's a good idea we don't get too carried away by it either. It's at least worth some care. I mean, maybe it's your doctoral thesis, so yes, research your brains out. But in practical life, we should be careful of our attention drifting too far from what is truly significant. We have a Savior, our brother, a human like us who lived this life in service to his God. He's our model, our high priest, our advocate. He pours out God's Spirit to us to strengthen, guide, heal, and empower us to be loving ministers of his goodness to those around us. That's important. Heather, I truly am grateful for you stepping out of your comfort zone and talking this through with me. I can't wait to meet you one day and ask you the 74 other questions that I had to skip during the interview. I most appreciate how you had questions and just dove in for answers, listening closely and weighing what you heard. I pray that God continues his work in you and that his peace will be your calm in a troubling and disquieting world. May God bless you in your truth pursuits. I hope this podcast serves you well.